Got a nice family. I didn't think about it at the time, of course. Yeah, we just got along with everybody pretty well.
We're all different. We really are. And yet we've got a basic instinct. I call it an instinct, I guess, as to how we react to things.
I have to say that of almost anybody I know, nobody has as close a relationship with their brothers and sisters as I have.
We're always happy to see each other, and we don't fight. We disagree, but we don't fight.
I like my brothers. I'm proud of them. You know, I think they're all good looking and they're interesting people. And they're interested in other people. They all are. And I feel really fortunate to be part of a family like that.
Mom was very, she would attract to anybody and had a heart that, seemed to be more open than some. Dad was, he didn't show a lot of emotion, but he was a really, he gave people comfort.
He had his own business when I was growing up. He worked into his own business growing up. He worked for a construction firm, contractor. It seemed like it doing very well, but then the guy went out of business. He was going to go bankrupt, and all the people who had done business with him were going to lose money. They weren't going to get paid, and my dad stepped in and said, "I'll take over."
He worked hard, really hard. He spent, when I grew up, I saw him because I worked with him. From 11 to 13 years old, at least 11, before I was 13, before I was in junior high. I go to work with him every weekend and do whatever. I shovel dirt or sand or move things around or clean houses or help him pour concrete or whatever. Strip forms, more strip forms I've ever stripped in my life.
We were raised by a couple of really good parents. They were very affirming people. They saw potential in you, and they you feel loved and respected and trusted. And so when I grew up and left home, I had this armor around me, and not the kind of armor to keep people out, but the armor to keep the bad feelings out, just bounce off. Not that I wasn't insecure or had bad feelings or feel left out, not that those things didn't happen, but it just made me more secure in who I was as a person.
If you're of a particular personality and you happen to have everything fall in line for you, all the things that can go wrong and don't go wrong, the things that could go right do go right, and meet the right people and at the right time, and things just happen right. And I think that's what happened to me. In my case, what worked out, the thing that really clicked, was the fact that I grew up at just the right time. And I was at the right age when Kennedy started the Peace Corps, and I wanted to go because of what I just told you. I was interested in being overseas, and I was at the age when I wanted to do good deeds and feel good about it. And so two things, I wanted to do something good, and I wanted to go overseas and do it. And the Peace Corps gave me that opportunity. Not only that, but it sent me to an area, East Africa, which I didn't have the slightest, I didn't think I would ever, it's where I wanted to go, but I didn't think I had the slightest chance of doing it. And I remember thinking, I got the chance to go to Tanzania. Oh, that was absolutely wonderful. And I said, well, if I ever get to Tanzania, no matter where I am in that country, sometime during my 2-year stay there, I'll be able to get up to see the big wildlife places in the northern part of it, Ngorongoro Crater, Serengeti. And then when I actually our Peace Corps group actually reached Tanzania, it's in my book. I think the second day we were there, we had a meeting we were called to a meeting, and there were 5 or 6 members of our Peace Corps group who were foresters. And we were all going to go work for an organization in Tanzania that was bringing people out of the bush to settle in little villages so that they could be provided with medical aid and water and advice on farming and this kind of thing. And we were going to work for that organization and building houses and planting roads and that kind of stuff. We were called in this meeting, and there were 2 British foresters, because at that time Tanzania was just independent for a year or 2, and had hardly any trained people of its own to run the government. So these guys were British, part of the old colonial regime. I remember one of them, they wore shorts because this is Dar es Salaam on the coast, hot and muggy, humid. They were wearing shorts and long stockings up there, and one of the guys he was a pipe smoker, and he'd put his pipe stem down so his socks would hold it up, you know. I thought, boy, this is cool. But they said, you guys are foresters. Why do you want to go waste your 2 years in Tanzania building houses for this organization or whatever? Come work with us. Here's a list of jobs, and literally a list that long of forestry jobs that have been made available in Tanzania because the old colonial staff were moving. It didn't want to work for Africans or this sort of thing. And I looked at the list, and about halfway down was Forester, Ngorongoro Conservation Area. Talk about destiny falling in your lap, you know. And at that point, my life changed.
Well, I remember when we lived on Pacific Way, and I was maybe 5 years old. Dad had a big carpenter's chest that was in the garage, and he'd gotten it from somebody, and it was full of fishing stuff. And I remember old Lucky Louie's, which are salmon plugs in the boxes. And anyway, I decided I would go fishing because behind our house we had a big deep lot, and then there was another deep lot and a house and then a Pacific Place, and it was just kind of a loop that went around. And on the other, across the street on Pacific Place, was a home or homes, and they would go, and the back of those would go down to a slough. And I remember being at the house one day, and some big kids, 10 years old or something like that, came up through the backyard, and they had been fishing at the slough, and they'd caught some fish, and Dad and my oldest brother Dennis or Lance and myself was standing there, and the kids had caught a bunch of fish, and I remember Dad was saying, well, I think that's a perch and that's a bluegill, because the boys really didn't know what they'd caught, but they knew that they caught something. So that spurred me on, and I got to thinking about it, and I got into that big wooden chest, and I got some hooks and some line, and I must have gotten a pole somewhere. Anyway, I hit it out back, and then I just took off one day. And I don't ever remember having fished before. And I went down, and there were some kids fishing there, and I asked them, what do I do? And I don't know, I got the line tied up and a hook on, and I had some worms, and I must have taken them with me. I must have known enough to do that. I remember to this day what they said. You go over there. And it was away from where they were fishing, and there was this big, seemed like a big fir tree was growing out and up over the water. And they said you put the worm on, and on the hook you throw it in there, and you wait till you feel something jerking, and then you pull it in. That's what I did. I caught fish, perch and bluegill. And I don't remember how many I had, 3, 4, 5, something. But I did catch some fish, and I took those fish and stuck them on a stick. I run the stick through the gills, and I went home and I hit them out back. And then I just couldn't stand it any longer. Now, Mom didn't even know I'd been gone. And I had to take her out and show her those fish. Big mistake, really big mistake. She was mortified that I'd gone. And anyway, that's the first time I remember fishing. And I grew up on those sloughs, fishing all the time. It was, I tell my wife Kathy I would get up in the morning when we lived on Pacific Way, and I go, what am I going to do? Am I going to go up in the woods and play? Am I going to go down to the slough and fish? It just seemed like it was just a wonderful life.
I read an ad in the back of the Atlantic Monthly. The back of the Atlantic Monthly, they have all these little tiny ads, and there was one about going to school on a ship, and I went, oh, that would be so cool. And so I don't know what I did, but clip out the ad and put it in an envelope and send it somewhere. I don't remember what I did. But anyway, I got the information. It was World Campus Afloat, and you went to school on a ship and traveled around the world. Oh, it just sounded wonderful, but it was $2,000. That was your tuition and your trip on the ship. And it was beyond approachable for me. And so I said, oh, I can't do that. But I was working for my dad at the time in the office, and I got a call at the office one day, and it was this kid who had been on the ship, and he was now working to get people to come. And he said, oh, there's all kinds of financial aid available, and it's really wonderful. Just do it. And so I did. I applied, and I got accepted, and Dad helped me borrow some money. And then I applied for a scholarship from the ship, and then I talked my great uncle into giving me $100. And I went to school on World Campus Afloat from February to April or May, something like that, and traveled around the world. It was wonderful, really wonderful experience. And then I came back and went to the Evergreen State College the first year that it was started, and I was involved in a program called Man and Art. They were still getting organized. This was a very experimental college at the time, but somehow or other, because I had traveled before, I ended up getting work study to go to Europe ahead of a group of people who were going to do an anthropological studies in Europe and kind of, case the place. So I went to France along with a friend from college and spent a couple of months before school started going to colleges and interviewing about how people could get into college, finding out they couldn't because with the U.S. high school education and even a year of college was not enough, But I kind of put together a little booklet and stuff, and then they all went to Spain. No, I used any of my stuff. But I had work study, and then and I had it. I think I had it all year. And that was really all I did. I was running out of money, so I got a job as an au pair, and then got a job outside in a little town called Vernon. Well, actually, they lived in. The name is escaping me, but anyway, just up the Seine from Paris, right across from Giverny, actually, which is where Claude Monet's home is. But that's when I met Gordon. I met Gordon when we arrived on that trip. When we arrived in Paris, I was traveling with my girlfriend. We had flown into Brussels, and then we got the train to Paris. And I was the only one who spoke any French. So my friend and this guy we had picked up gave me the luggage, assigned me getting the luggage onto the train. And so I checked the luggage in. But when we got to Paris, we found out that what I had done was check the luggage into the check room, but not onto the train. So my girlfriend and I spent 3 days going from train station to train station in Paris trying to track down our luggage. And we would go into these offices. You know, the kids today, they have computers, right? We'd go into these offices, and even this was even antiquated then. We'd walk into the office and give them our name and tell our story, and they'd send us to a room, and this guy would have a book about this big in front of him. Each guy in each room, this thick. Then with that book open, go through the pages, all down finally. And I think we only really made headway when my girlfriend threw a tantrum in the middle of the train station on the floor, screaming and crying. And then somebody set us the right way. We had a difficult time. But anyway, we finally got our luggage. But we were staying in a cheap hotel in Paris with this guy who we had grown to really not like. He was a know-it-all. Well, you know how know-it-alls are. He couldn't talk about anything, but he had done it before, and he was the best, you know. And Gordon was sharing the same room. And Gordon and I have different memories of how we met, but my memory is that my girlfriend, because we had been traipsing all over Paris, had gotten blisters, and she's a very theatrical person. And she was pretty foul-mouthed as a young person. So she was in our room complaining very loudly about there being no blankety-blank Band-Aids in Paris. So she needed a Band-Aid. And there was a knock on the door, and she opened the door, and there was Gordon with a first aid kit. So that's how we met.
I worked for that firm for about 15 years, or 15 to 20, and got to do a lot of really interesting things. Worked on the Pike Place Market. I remember the renovation they did for that. Seattle Tech Airport, worked on that. I did a lot of smaller jobs. And then I did that until 1984, and then I started my own firm. You get up in a firm so far, and you can't, it's you and the boss. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but it was close. I could see the handwriting on the wall that it just wasn't in the cards that anybody was gonna move up much higher than I was at that time. And so I said, well, I think maybe it's time for me to move on. And he says, yeah, I think so.
We met in Calgary. Monica's from Calgary. It's where that's where she born and raised there. I had a friend, a good friend, from high school. He was in Europe working, and he met a guy, an Italian, but from Canada. And so when he got back, he said, well, let's go up and visit this guy. And he lived in Calgary. So we drove up there. I'd never been to Calgary. Went in the middle of the winter. Freezing cold, 20 below zero. We had regular old jackets. We're from Longview. We didn't know what cold was. You know, snot's freezing in your nose. I remember it was such a brutal change. But anyway, we were going to the bars, trying to, but in Calgary at that time, you couldn't wear jeans and be at a bar. Yeah, really. It was, yeah. Had to wear dress pants, couldn't wear jeans. Wow. And girls had to wear dresses, couldn't wear, yeah. So we were having a striking out in the bars. So it was so cold that we had to go from Yeah, we're trying to get from one place to the other. We're going through buildings to keep warm, so we're going through hotels. And we were going through one of the hotels, and 3 girls came down the stairs, and Monica was in the forefront. And they came down, they said, "You guys want to come to a Christmas party? We're having a Christmas party. Would you like to come? Well, you can dance and free food and free booze." I was up the stairs. Like the other guys weren't. I'm done with this. This looks way more attractive to me than what we've been doing. So we went up, and that's where we met. And we went out several times after that, and then we spent a year and a half of long distance dating and way too much money on phones, and I got married.
We've been married 60 years, and it's just wonderful, wonderful. And there are things that Kathy's dad was an alcoholic, and the family had split, and so her upbringing was much different than mine, and I realized what a truly wonderful job our parents did with raising us. When I think about it, it's really carried over into the whole family. I think about my nieces and nephews and their children, and it's just, there just doesn't seem to be any drama. We're pretty much are what you see. That's what you get, and we have grace and mercy for others. Because we certainly need it at times. So, yeah, it's a special family.